My name is Bridget Owusu. I'm 24 years old, and 6 months ago, I stood in a conference room on the 32nd floor of Penmark Industries while the CEO looked directly at my brother and asked one question. One single question. And in that moment, everything my brother had stolen from me, every idea, every late night, every presentation he slapped his name on, all of it came crashing down on him like a ceiling made of glass. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Before I tell you what that question was, I need you to understand how we got there. Because this isn't just a story about credit. It's about the quiet way someone can hollow you out from the inside while smiling at you over Sunday dinner. It's about a brother who looked at my work and saw his ladder. And it's about the moment I stopped climbing for him and started building something of my own. Before I go on, if this story hits close to home, take a second to like and subscribe. Drop your city and your local time in the comments. I always read them, and I love knowing where you're tuning in from. Now, let me take you back. I grew up in a mid-sized town outside of Columbus, Ohio. Nothing fancy. My dad worked in logistics for a packaging company. My mom did medical billing from home. We weren't poor, but the word comfortable would have been generous. We were stable. That was enough. My brother, Dominic, is 3 years older than me, and growing up, he was the son. I'm not saying that with bitterness, not anymore. I'm saying it because it was the truth of our household. Dominic was loud, confident, quick with a joke, good at making adults feel like he respected them even when he didn't. He played varsity basketball. He ran for student council. He had this energy that filled a room before he even opened his mouth. And me? I was the one sitting at the kitchen table at 11 p.m., rereading my notes for the third time. I was the one who got straight A's and heard "good job, Bridge," while Dominic got a standing ovation for passing algebra. I learned early that effort doesn't get the same applause as charm, but I didn't resent it. Not then. I loved my brother. I genuinely did. I thought we were a team. After college, I got a junior analyst position at Penmark Industries. It's a mid-level consulting firm that handles operational strategy for logistics and supply chain companies. Not glamorous, but the work was real, complex, the kind of job where one good idea could save a client $2 million a year, and nobody outside the building would ever know your name. I was good at it. I don't say that to boast. I say it because it matters for what comes next. Within 18 months, I had moved from data cleanup to building full strategy models. My manager, Helen Zhao, started CCing me on client-facing emails. I was asked to sit in on calls with directors twice my age. I wasn't climbing fast. I was climbing steady. Then Dominic lost his job. He'd been working at a marketing firm in Cincinnati. Something about a disagreement with his manager. He never gave me the full story. One Thursday night in October, he showed up at my apartment with a duffel bag, a half-dead phone charger, and that same golden smile. "Bridge, I just need a couple months. I'll get back on my feet." I said yes without thinking. He was my brother. 2 weeks later, he asked if my company was hiring. I told him there was an open coordinator role in the operations department. Not my team, but the same building. He applied. I put in a word with HR. He got the interview. He got the job. And for a little while, it was fine. We'd drive to work together, grab lunch in the second-floor cafeteria. He'd ask me about my projects, and I'd explain them. Not to show off, just because he seemed interested. He'd nod and say things like, "You're way smarter than people give you credit for." I didn't notice what he was really doing. He wasn't just listening, he was collecting. The first time it happened, I almost missed it entirely. I had been working on a restructuring model for a warehouse client, a way to consolidate 3 distribution centers into 2 without losing delivery speed. I had spent 5 weeks on it, ran the numbers 4 different ways, built a 12-page internal brief. I sent the brief to Helen on a Friday afternoon. By Monday morning, Dominic's name was on a nearly identical proposal. Reformatted, reworded, but structurally the same, submitted to the operations director as a cross-departmental efficiency concept. He had taken my work, changed the font, and called it his own. When I confronted him that evening, he laughed. Not cruelly, casually, like I was overreacting. Bridge, relax. I just used some of the concepts you mentioned. It's not like you invented supply chain logic. I stood in my own kitchen, looking at my own brother, and felt something shift behind my ribs. Not anger, something worse. Doubt. Maybe he was right. Maybe the ideas weren't that original. Maybe I was being territorial. Maybe I should just let it go. So I did. And that was the first mistake. Because Dominic didn't stop. He was just getting started. And by the time I realized how deep the damage went, I had almost nothing left to prove it was ever mine. Almost. To understand Dominic, you have to understand our family. Not the version we showed at Thanksgiving dinners or in Christmas photos. The real one. The one with patterns so old they felt like furniture. You stopped noticing them, but they shaped every room you walked through. My mother, Grace, loved both of us. I believe that completely. But love isn't the same as attention, and attention in our house had a clear direction. It pointed toward Dominic. When I was 9 and Dominic was 12, he got selected for a regional basketball camp. It was a weekend thing, 2 hours away, moderate cost, nothing extreme. But the way my parents reacted, you'd think he'd been recruited by NASA. My dad took a half day off work to drive him. My mom bought him new sneakers. There were conversations at dinner for a week about Dom's opportunity. That same month, I won second place in the district science fair. I built a working model showing how water filtration systems could be designed using sand and charcoal layers. My teacher, Mrs. Adler, told my mom it was one of the most detailed entries she'd ever seen from a fourth grader. My mom smiled and said, "That's great, sweetie. Put it in your room so it doesn't clutter the living room." It never came up at dinner. Not once. I'm not telling you this so you feel sorry for me. I'm telling you because these small moments are the bricks. One by one, they built a wall between what I achieved and what anyone around me acknowledged. And Dominic, whether he knew it or not, grew up on the other side of that wall, where everything he did was reflected back to him in gold. He wasn't a bully as a kid. That's what makes it complicated. He wasn't pulling my hair or stealing my lunch money. He was charming. He'd help me with homework sometimes. He'd let me sit in his room while he played guitar, badly, and we'd both laugh about it. There were years where I genuinely thought we were close. But there was always this undercurrent, this understanding, never spoken out loud, that Dominic's path mattered more, that his failures were temporary setbacks and mine were character flaws. If he bombed a test, it was because the teacher didn't explain things well. If I bombed a test, which was rare, it was because I wasn't focused. My dad, Gerald, was quieter about it. He didn't praise Dominic out loud the way my mom did, but he deferred to him. At dinner, he'd ask Dominic about his day first. When there were decisions to make, where to eat, what to watch, what to do on the weekend, Dominic's vote won. Not because anyone forced it, just because that was the gravity in our house. By the time I got to high school, I had learned something without anyone teaching it to me. The safest place to be was useful. Not seen, useful. If I was helpful, if I did the dishes without being asked, if I edited Dominic's college application essay, if I stayed quiet when plans changed last minute, then I had a role. I belonged. Not in the spotlight, but in the structure. I carried that into adulthood, into work, into friendships, into the apartment I shared with Dominic after he moved in. He never formally thanked me for getting him that job at Penmark, by the way. Not once. He mentioned it in passing to a coworker once. Yeah, my sister helped connect me. But the way he said it made it sound like I'd forwarded a LinkedIn post, not personally vouched for him to our HR director. Within 3 months of working there, Dominic had done what Dominic always does. He made friends with the right people, not the smartest people, the loudest ones, the ones who controlled meeting invites and office visibility. He started sitting in on strategy briefings that were above his role. He'd volunteer for cross-functional projects, not to do the work, to be seen near the work. And I kept feeding him without realizing it. Tuesday nights became our work talk evenings. He'd cook pasta, always the same oversalted penne, and ask me what I was building. I'd pull up models on my laptop and walk him through my logic. He'd ask questions that sounded supportive. How did you calculate that margin? What's the variable on distribution lag? Would this apply to other sectors? I thought he was learning. I thought I was helping my brother grow. He was taking notes. Actual notes. I found that out later. The warehouse consolidation proposal was the first theft, but it wasn't the last. Over the next 5 months, Dominic submitted 4 separate ideas to various directors and managers at Penmark. A client intake redesign I had sketched out over a weekend, a vendor evaluation matrix I had been refining for weeks, a predictive cost model I built using 2 years of internal data, and a regional logistics playbook I had started drafting in my personal notebook, the one I kept on the kitchen counter. Every time the format changed just enough. Different headers, different language. Sometimes he'd flip the order of sections or swap out a chart style. But the core thinking, the architecture of every concept, was mine. And every time, someone praised him. Great initiative, Dom. This is sharp thinking. You've got real strategic instincts. Nobody said those things to me, because nobody knew. The worst part wasn't the theft. It was the doubt it planted. Every time I sat in a meeting and heard someone reference Dominic's framework, or Dom's model, I felt a crack run through my confidence. Not because I didn't know the truth, but because the truth didn't seem to matter. He said it was his. People believed him, and I sat 2 floors below, doing the actual thinking, wondering if maybe I just wasn't good enough at being visible. There was one evening, early March, a Wednesday, when I came home late from work. I'd been debugging a forecasting tool for 6 straight hours. My eyes burned. My back ached. I dropped my bag by the door and saw Dominic on the couch, feet up, watching a basketball game on my television. He looked over and said, "Hey, Bridge, rough day?" And I almost told him everything. Almost said, "You're stealing from me and I don't know how to make you stop." But I looked at his face, that relaxed, easy expression, and I realized something that made my stomach drop. He didn't think he was doing anything wrong. In his mind, we were sharing. In his mind, I was the support and he was the frontman, the way it had always been, the way our whole family had trained us both to be. That night, I lay in bed staring at a crack in the ceiling that ran from the light fixture to the corner of the wall. I traced it with my eyes, over and over, and I thought about something my college advisor once told me. She said, "Bridget, talent without a voice is just someone else's material." I didn't sleep that night, but something inside me started to shift. Not loudly, not dramatically, just a small, quiet turn, like a lock clicking open in a room everyone forgot existed. What came next is the part I still have trouble talking about. Because it wasn't just betrayal anymore. It was the moment Dominic went further than I ever imagined he would. And it nearly cost me everything. The project that changed everything was called Meridian. Penmark had been chasing a contract with a national grocery chain, Hargrove and Lyle, for nearly 2 years. They wanted a full operational overhaul, supply chain restructuring, delivery route optimization, vendor consolidation across 14 regional warehouses. It was the biggest potential client Penmark had pursued in over a decade. The internal estimate was worth somewhere around $12 million over 3 years. Helen Zhao pulled me into her office on a Tuesday in late March and closed the door. She sat across from me with her hands folded on the desk and said, "Bridget, I want you to build the pitch model for Meridian." I blinked. "Me?" "You. I've watched your work for over a year now. The consolidation model you built last fall was one of the cleanest pieces of strategy I've seen from anyone at your level. I want you to lead the internal framework. You'll have support from analytics, but the architecture is yours." I walked out of that office feeling something I hadn't felt in a long time. Not just pride, ownership. This was mine. Officially. Documented. My name on the project file. My login on the shared drive folder. My fingerprints on every formula. For the next 6 weeks, I lived inside that project. I'm not exaggerating. I averaged 11-hour days, sometimes 12. I skipped lunches. I turned down a friend's birthday dinner. I canceled a dentist appointment twice. My weekends disappeared into spreadsheets and scenario planning. The Meridian model wasn't just a pitch deck, it was a 60-page operational strategy with 3 tiers of implementation, full cost-benefit analysis for each phase, custom KPI dashboards, and a predictive tool that adjusted delivery estimates based on seasonal demand curves. I built that tool from scratch, wrote the logic myself, tested it against 2 years of anonymized client data until it held up under every variable I could throw at it. Helen reviewed my progress every Friday. Each time she'd nod slowly, make a few notes, and say something like, "This is getting there." Coming from Helen, that was practically a standing ovation. I made one mistake during those 6 weeks. One. I kept working on parts of it at home, not the full model. The shared drive required VPN access and I was careful about security. But my handwritten notes, my logic outlines, my rough sketches for the dashboard layout, those lived in my notebook. The brown leather one with the bent corner, the one I always left on the kitchen counter, and Dominic was still living with me. I didn't talk to him about Meridian, not once. After the earlier incidents, I had quietly stopped sharing my work with him during our Tuesday evening dinners. I didn't make it dramatic. I just started saying, "Nothing interesting this week," or "Same old spreadsheet stuff." He didn't push. I thought the boundary was holding. I didn't know he'd been going through my notebook. Here's what happened. 3 days before our internal review, the one where Helen and I would present the Meridian model to Penmark's senior leadership, Dominic requested a meeting with the operations director, Frank Massaro. He booked it through the internal calendar system at 7:45 in the morning, before most of the office arrived. In that meeting, he presented a condensed version of my Meridian framework. Not the full 60 pages. He didn't have access to those. But he had my logic structure, my phased implementation approach, my delivery optimization concept, including the seasonal adjustment idea that I had sketched in pencil on page 41 of my notebook. He had reformatted it into a 12-slide deck with his name on every page. He told Frank he'd been developing it independently as a side initiative. Frank was impressed. Why wouldn't he be? The thinking was strong, because it wasn't Dominic's thinking. It was mine. I found out 2 days later, the morning of our internal review. Helen called me into her office at 8:15. She wasn't sitting behind her desk this time. She was standing by the window, arms crossed, and she didn't look at me right away. "Bridget, we have a problem." She told me that Frank Massaro had flagged a significant overlap between my Meridian presentation and a separate proposal Dominic had submitted earlier that week. Frank's concern, which he had, raised to Helen's boss, the VP of Strategy, Martin Kessler, was that either the work had been duplicated or that someone had copied from someone else. And because Dominic had submitted his version first, by 48 hours, the assumption forming upstairs was that I had copied from him. I stood in Helen's office and felt my chest close like a fist. Helen, that's my work. Every piece of it. He took it from my personal notes. She looked at me for a long time. I could see she believed me, but belief and proof aren't the same thing in a corporate environment. I hear you, she said quietly. But Frank is backing Dominic's version, and Martin wants to review both submissions before the client meeting next Thursday. Until then, your presentation is on hold. On hold. 6 weeks of my life. On hold. I walked out of her office and went to the stairwell beside the elevator bank on the 32nd floor. It was cold in there. The kind of industrial cold that hums through. Concrete. I sat on the second step, put my hands over my face and cried. Not the loud kind. The kind that comes from somewhere deep, where the sound doesn't even make it out. My shoulders shook. My throat burned. I pressed my palms against my eyes until I saw spots. It wasn't just the work, it was the pattern, the endless, grinding pattern. Dominic takes, Dominic charms, Dominic gets believed. And I sit in a stairwell, proving nothing, holding the receipts nobody asks to see. I went home that evening. Dominic was in the kitchen, heating leftover soup. He looked up at me and smiled, the same easy, unbothered smile. Hey, Bridge. Long day? I stared at him. I wanted to scream. I wanted to grab my notebook off the counter and throw it at the wall and make him admit what he'd done. But I didn't. Because I knew what would happen. He'd laugh. He'd minimize it. He'd say I was dramatic. He'd say something like, "We probably just had similar ideas. Great minds, right?" And somehow, by the end of the conversation, I'd be the one apologizing. So instead, I picked up my notebook. I held it to my chest, and I walked past him without a word. I went into my bedroom, locked the door, sat on the floor with my back against the bed, and opened to the first page. I ran my fingers over my handwriting, the slanted letters, the margin arrows, the coffee ring on page 12 from that late night in February. This was mine. I knew it. Every page knew it. But knowing and proving are two different wars. And right then, sitting on that floor, I was losing both. That night, something in me broke. Not shattered. Broke. Like a bone that heals crooked. The part of me that still wanted to believe Dominic meant well, that he just didn't realize what he was doing, that we were still a team, that part went dark. And in its place, something quieter took root. Not revenge, not anger. Clarity. I didn't know yet what I was going to do. I didn't have a plan. I didn't have allies. I had a locked bedroom door and a notebook full of work that someone else was getting credit for. But I had one thing Dominic never counted on. I had the original timestamps. Every draft. Every file version. Every late-night save. He just didn't know that yet. The next morning, I woke up at 4:53. Not from an alarm. From the kind of wakefulness that comes when your body knows rest isn't an option anymore. The apartment was dark. Dominic's door was closed. I could hear the low hum of his fan through the wall. I sat at the edge of my bed for a long time, staring at the carpet. There was a small stain near the dresser, tea I'd spilled months ago. And I remember thinking how strange it was that I noticed it now, in the worst week of my professional life. Your brain does that. It clings to small, meaningless things when the big things are too heavy to hold. I got dressed, made coffee in silence, left the apartment before 6. At work, I went straight to Helen's office. She wasn't there yet. She usually arrived around 7:30. So I sat in the hallway outside her door like a student waiting for the principal. A janitor passed me twice. The second time, he gave me a small nod, like he understood something without knowing the details. When Helen arrived, she looked at me and sighed, not with annoyance, with weight. "Come in," she said. I told her everything, not the emotional version, the factual one. I told her about the months of Dominic asking about my work, about the Tuesday night conversations, about the notebook, about the previous proposals he had submitted under his name, the warehouse consolidation, the vendor matrix, the cost model. I laid it all out like a case file, because that's what it was. Helen listened without interrupting. When I finished, she leaned back in her chair and said, "Bridget, I believe you, but Martin has already flagged this as a credibility review. If I go to him with your word against Dominic's, and Dominic submitted first, it's going to look like I'm protecting my own team member. What if I can prove it?" She paused. "What kind of proof?" "File metadata. My drafts on the shared drive have timestamps going back 6 weeks. Version histories. Save logs. My local files have creation dates from before Dominic even joined the operations meetings where he presented his version. And my notebook. I've been writing in it since January. His deck was made last weekend. The ink on my pages is older than his entire file." Helen was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Put it together. A clean comparison. Timestamps on one side, his submission dates on the other. Don't editorialize. Don't make it personal. Just show the math." I nodded and stood up. "Bridget," she said as I reached the door, "be careful. Frank Massaro likes Dominic, and Martin listens to Frank." I spent the next 2 days building my evidence file. I worked on it after hours, alone in the office, the overhead lights on automatic, dimming because the sensors thought everyone had gone home. I pulled every version of every document I'd created on the shared drive. I screenshotted the metadata, creation dates, last modified stamps, author fields. I organized them chronologically and placed them beside the dates Dominic had submitted his proposals. The pattern was obvious. Every single one of his submissions came days or weeks after my files were created. Not once did he produce anything before I had already built the foundation. But here's where it got harder. I tried to bring it to Martin Kessler directly. I emailed his assistant and requested a 15-minute meeting. The response came back within the hour. "Mr. Kessler is not available for individual meetings during the review period. All concerns should be directed through your department lead." So I went through Helen. She forwarded my evidence package to Martin on Thursday afternoon with a brief professional note. I know because she showed me the email before she sent it. Friday came. No response. Monday. Nothing. Tuesday, I asked Helen if she'd heard back. She shook her head. He acknowledged receipt. That's all. Meanwhile, Dominic was thriving. I saw it from across the cafeteria, from the edges of hallways, from the corner of my eye in every meeting I no longer felt welcome in. He was having coffee with Frank Massaro. He was laughing with the VP's assistant outside the elevator. He was wearing a new blazer, charcoal gray, fitted, and carrying a portfolio binder I'd never seen before. He looked like someone being groomed for a promotion, and I looked like someone filing a complaint. That's the part people don't tell you about workplace theft. It's not just that someone takes your work. It's that the system around you starts to reorganize itself in their favor. People who smiled at you last week now avoid eye contact. Meetings you used to be invited to quietly disappear from your calendar. You become the disruption. The inconvenience. The person making things complicated. If you've ever been in a situation where you knew you were right, but the world treated you like you were the problem, you know exactly what I'm talking about. And if you have, drop a word in the comments. Just one word. I'll know what it means. By the second week of the review period, I started wondering if I should just let it go. Maybe it wasn't worth the fight. Maybe I should put my head down, keep working, rebuild quietly. Maybe trying to prove the truth was doing more damage than the lie itself. I almost quit. I want to be honest about that. One Wednesday night, I sat in my car in the parking garage after work for 40 minutes, engine off, staring at the concrete wall in front of me. I pulled up a job board on my phone, scrolled through listings in other cities: Denver, Charlotte, Portland. I imagined starting over somewhere clean, where nobody knew my name or my brother's name or the politics of the 32nd floor. But then I thought about my notebook, the one sitting in my bedroom. Page after page of my thinking, my logic, my late nights. And I thought about Dominic sleeping 10 feet away through a shared wall, breathing easy, dreaming of nothing. And something quiet and stubborn held its ground inside me. No, I wasn't going to run. I wasn't going to shrink. I wasn't going to let the pattern win again, not the one from childhood, not the one from this office, not the one in my own head that kept whispering that maybe I didn't deserve the space I had earned. I closed the job board. I turned the engine on. I drove home. The next morning, I did something I hadn't done in months. I woke up early, not from anxiety, but from intention. I made my bed. I made my coffee. I sat at the kitchen table before Dominic woke up and I opened a fresh notebook. Not the old one, a new one. Blue cover, unlined pages. On the first page, I wrote one sentence: I will outlast this. It wasn't a plan. Not yet. But it was a stake in the ground. A promise from me to me. The kind of promise nobody else needs to witness for it to count. I didn't know it then, but the person who would help me keep that promise was already in the building. I just hadn't met her yet. Her name was Constance Albright. She was the newly appointed chief of staff to the CEO, Raymond Ware. She had joined Penmark 3 weeks earlier from a competitor firm in Atlanta, and most people in the building didn't know what to make of her yet. She was tall, mid-40s, with short silver-streaked hair and a habit of listening longer than anyone expected before she spoke. I met her by accident. It was a Thursday afternoon in late April. I had stayed behind after a cross-departmental briefing on Q2 projections, one of the few meetings I was still included in. I was gathering my papers slowly, in no rush to go back to my desk where the silence had started to feel personal. Most people had filed out. I thought I was alone. You had something to say in there. I looked up. Constance was still seated at the far end of the table, a leather notebook open in front of her. She wasn't looking at me with curiosity or pity. She was looking at me the way someone looks at a sentence they want to finish reading. "Excuse me?" I said. During the delivery cost segment, when Mitchell was walking through the regional projections, you shifted in your seat, you opened your mouth, then you closed it. You had something. I didn't know what to say. She was right. Mitchell Greer, one of the senior analysts, had been presenting a delivery cost model that I knew had a flaw in its seasonal weighting. I had caught it instantly but said nothing because the last thing I needed was more attention on me during the review period. "It wasn't my place," I said. Constance closed her notebook. "Whose place was it?" That question landed in a way I didn't expect. Not sharp, not rhetorical, just clear. Like she had taken a cloudy window and wiped it. With one pass, I sat back down. And I told her, not everything, not the full story, but I told her I had been working on logistics modeling that touched on the same data Mitchell had presented, and that I believed the seasonal adjustment was underweighted for the Northeast corridor. She asked me to explain. So I did. Right there, in that empty conference room, with the projector still humming and the coffee going cold, I walked her through the logic. I grabbed a whiteboard marker and sketched the curve I'd built for the meridian model, the one that was still sitting in limbo somewhere in Martin Kessler's inbox. Constance watched. She asked 2 questions, both sharp, both fair. When I finished, she said, "Send me your work." Not a summary, the actual files. I hesitated. I should probably mention, there's an internal review happening right now involving some of that work. A question of authorship. She tilted her head slightly. Are you the author? Yes. Then send me the files. I sent them that evening. Every version, every timestamp, the original Meridian framework, the metadata logs, the evidence comparison I had built. I didn't add a cover note. I didn't explain the drama. I just let the work speak. 2 days passed. Then 3. I heard nothing from Constance and tried not to spiral. I focused on my day-to-day tasks, kept my head level, and avoided Dominic at the office entirely. At home, we had settled into a strange, cold distance. He still made small talk, weather, sports scores, what to order for dinner, and I responded with just enough to avoid confrontation. We were 2 people sharing an apartment the way strangers share an airport bench. On the following Monday, I got an email from Constance's assistant. 1 line. Ms. Albright would like to schedule a recurring weekly check-in with you. Thursdays at 4 p.m. Please confirm. I stared at that email for a full minute. Then I confirmed. Those Thursday meetings became the turning point. Constance never told me what to do. She didn't play mentor in the way you see in movies. No grand speeches, no shoulder squeezes, no dramatic, "I believe in you" moments. She was precise. She would read my work, ask specific questions, point out where my analysis was strong and where my communication was weak. She pushed me to present my ideas more concisely. She challenged my assumptions. She made me tighter. "Your instincts are good," she told me once, during our 3rd session. "But you build work like you're afraid someone will take it before you finish. You overload the detail because you think density is protection. It's not. Clarity is." That hit me somewhere I didn't expect. She was right. I had been overbuilding everything, not because the work required it, but because I was subconsciously creating proof. Every extra page, every extra data point was me trying to make it impossible for someone to claim it wasn't mine. And in doing that, I was burying my own voice under layers of defense. I started stripping my work down. Cleaner models, sharper summaries, stronger opening arguments. I rebuilt my Meridian framework from scratch, not because the original was flawed, but because I wanted a version that sounded like me at my best. Not my desperate best, my clear best. By mid-May, Constance had introduced me to Raymond Ware, not formally, just a brief encounter after a leadership meeting where she brought me along to present a revised logistics concept. Raymond was in his late 50s, quiet, with reading glasses perpetually perched halfway down his nose. He asked me one question about my methodology. I answered it in 3 sentences, and he nodded. "Clean thinking," he said. That was all. But Constance caught my eye as we left the room, and for the first time I saw her smile. Just barely. Just enough. Meanwhile, the Meridian contract was approaching. Hargrove and Lyle had set a final pitch date for June 12th. Penmark's leadership had to decide who would present the operational framework, and Martin Kessler's review had gone suspiciously quiet. No verdict. No update. No email. Dominic, however, was moving like a man who already knew the outcome. He had been pulled into 2 planning meetings for the Hargrove pitch. He had new business cards printed. I saw the box on his desk when I passed his floor for a meeting with accounting. He was telling colleagues he was leading the Meridian strategy. I heard it secondhand from a woman in payroll who thought she was giving me a compliment. "Your brother's really making moves," she said. "Must run in the family." I smiled. I said nothing, because I knew something Dominic didn't. Constance had already recommended to Raymond that the final Meridian pitch include a live Q&A component. A real-time operational walkthrough where the presenting strategist would have to defend the model without notes. No script. No rehearsal window. Just the raw thinking behind the work. And Raymond had agreed. The pitch meeting was set. June 12th, 32nd floor. Conference room A. Dominic was going to stand in front of the CEO and present my work. And then Raymond Ware was going to ask him a question he couldn't answer. June 12th arrived the way important days always do. Slowly at first, then all at once. I woke up at 5:15. The apartment was still dark. I could hear rain tapping against the bedroom window. Light and steady, like the sky was keeping time. I lay there for a few minutes, breathing, running through the day in my mind. Not rehearsing, just settling. The way you do before something you've been walking toward for a long time finally comes into view. Dominic was already in the kitchen when I came out. He was wearing the charcoal blazer again, the fitted one, with a white shirt underneath. His hair was freshly cut. He looked polished, confident, ready. He glanced at me and said, "Big day." I poured my coffee. "Yeah?" "The Hargrove pitch. I'm presenting the Meridian framework to Raymond and the client team." He said it casually, the way you'd mention picking up dry cleaning, like it was already settled, already his. I took a sip of coffee. It was too hot and burned the roof of my mouth, but I didn't flinch. "Good luck," I said. He smiled, that same golden smile. "Thanks, Bridge." I drove to work alone that morning. Dominic had left before me. He wanted to get to the office early to set up the conference room. I took the long route, through the side streets near the park, where the oak trees were heavy with June leaves, and the rain had turned everything a darker shade of green. I parked on the third level of the garage, sat in the car for 2 full minutes, opened my blue notebook, the one I had started weeks ago, and read the sentence on the first page. "I will outlast this." Then I closed it, put it in my bag, and walked inside. The pitch was scheduled for 10:30 in conference room A on the 32nd floor. It was the big one. Long mahogany table, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, a screen at the far wall connected to the presentation system. Penmark reserved it for clients they wanted to impress. By 10 o'clock, the room was filling. The Hargrove and Lyle team had sent 4 representatives, including their COO, a woman named Dana Platt, who was known in the industry for asking uncomfortable questions and not smiling until she had a reason to. On the Penmark side, Martin Kessler was there, Frank Massaro, Helen Zhao, 2 analysts from the data team, Constance Albright, and Raymond Ware himself, who sat at the head of the table with his reading glasses already on. I was seated near the back, not hidden. Constance had made sure I was on the attendee list, but not featured. I had a plain folder in front of me. Inside it was a printed copy of my original Meridian framework, complete with file metadata timestamps paper-clipped to the front page. I didn't plan to use it, but I wanted it close. The way you keep an umbrella in your bag even when the forecast says clear. Dominic stood at the front of the room. He had the 12-slide deck loaded on the screen, the one built from my logic, my architecture, my notebook. He looked comfortable. He always looked comfortable in rooms like this. It was his gift. The ability to fill a space with warmth and authority even when neither was earned. He began the presentation. I have to be honest. He did it well. The slides were clean. His delivery was smooth. He walked through the phased implementation plan with confidence, hit the cost-benefit highlights, smiled at the right moments. He used phrases like operational elasticity and dynamic vendor calibration, terms I had written in my notebook in February, in pencil, at 2 in the morning. Dana Platt from Hargrove asked a few clarifying questions during the walkthrough. Dominic answered them competently. Surface level, but enough. Frank. Massaro nodded along from his seat like a proud uncle. Martin Kessler made notes on a legal pad. For 22 minutes, it looked like Dominic was going to pull it off. Then the presentation ended. Dominic clicked to the final slide. A summary dashboard showing projected cost savings across 3 years. He smiled at the room and said, "I'm happy to take any questions." And Raymond Ware, who had been silent for the entire presentation, removed his reading glasses, set them on the table, and leaned forward. "I have one." The room shifted. Not dramatically. No one gasped or turned. But the energy changed the way a room changes when someone important decides to speak. Chairs creaked slightly. Pens stopped moving. Raymond looked directly at Dominic. His voice was calm, even. The voice of a man who already knew the answer to what he was about to ask. The seasonal demand adjustment in your delivery optimization model. You've weighted it at a 12% variable for the Northeast Corridor during Q4. Walk me through how you derived that number. Specifically, what dataset did you use? What was the baseline year? And why 12 rather than the industry standard 8? Silence. Dominic blinked. Just once. But I saw it. That single blink. And I knew. He didn't know. He didn't know because he had never built the model. He had copied the output but never understood the engine underneath. He cleared his throat. "That's a great question, Raymond. The 12% figure was derived from a combination of historical logistics data and internal benchmarking across similar client profiles." Raymond didn't move. "Which historical data? What years? What client profiles?" Dominic's smile thinned. Not gone, but thinner, like a wire being pulled taut. "It was a composite analysis. I'd have to pull up the specific source files to give you exact figures." "You built this model," Raymond said. It wasn't a question. It was a mirror. "Yes. Then you should know the inputs." The silence that followed was 10 seconds long. I know because I counted. 10 seconds of Dominic standing at the front of a mahogany conference room under fluorescent lights, in his fitted charcoal blazer, with nothing behind his eyes but empty air. Dana Platt from Hargrove shifted in her seat. Martin Kessler stopped writing. Frank Massaro stared at the table. And then Constance Albright spoke, calmly, without standing. "Bridget, could you speak to that?" Every head in the room turned toward me. I opened my folder. I didn't rush. I didn't stand either. Not yet. I looked at the printed page in front of me, though I didn't need to. I knew this number the way I knew my own phone number. I had built it, tested it, rebuilt it, defended it in my own head 100 times. The 12% figure, I said, was derived from a 3-year regional data set, fiscal years 22 through 24, pulled from the U.S. Department of Transportation's Freight Analysis Framework, cross-referenced with Penmark's internal delivery performance data from the Langford and Beckett accounts. The baseline year was 23. I used 12 rather than the standard 8 because the Northeast Corridor shows a consistent 4-point demand spike tied to early holiday fulfillment cycles that begin in late October, not December. The industry standard doesn't account for that because most models use national averages. Mine used corridor-specific inputs. The room didn't gasp. There was no dramatic music, no slow clap, no movie moment. But something happened that was more powerful than any of that. Raymond Ware looked at me, then looked at Dominic, then looked back at me. And he nodded. One nod. Slow. Certain. Dominic stood frozen at the front of the room, his lips parted slightly like he was about to say something, but nothing came. His hands, which had been resting on the edge of the podium, slid off. He looked at me. Not with anger, not with guilt, but with the blank, wide expression of someone who had just realized the floor beneath them was made of paper. If you've ever watched someone's mask fall off in real time, not in private, not in a fight, but in a room full of people who now see the truth, you know exactly how that silence felt. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I just sat in my chair, folder open, and let the silence do what silence does best. It told the truth. The meeting didn't end with fireworks. It ended with procedure. Raymond Ware thanked the Hargrove and Lyle team for their time. Dana Platt gave a diplomatic nod, gathered her papers, and left with her team. Whatever impression Penmark had made, good or fractured, it was now sealed behind a closed door and a handshake in the hallway. But inside that conference room, the air had changed composition. Martin Kessler stood slowly, tucked his legal pad under his arm, and left without looking at anyone. Frank Massaro followed, but not before glancing at Dominic with an expression I can only describe as a man realizing he had co-signed the wrong loan. Dominic stayed at the front of the room. He hadn't moved. His hands were at his sides, his blazer slightly wrinkled where he'd gripped the podium. He looked at me once, a long, searching look, and then he picked up his portfolio binder and walked out. He didn't say a word. Helen Zhao caught my arm in the hallway as I was leaving. She squeezed it once. That was all. No speech. No, I told you so. Just a squeeze that said, I saw it. I've always seen it. Constance found me 20 minutes later in my cubicle. She sat on the edge of the desk across from mine. It belonged to an analyst on leave. And crossed her arms. Raymond wants a full debrief, she said. Monday morning, 9 o'clock. His office. Bring everything. Everything? Your files, your timestamps, your version history, the evidence package you sent me. He wants to understand the full timeline. I nodded. Bridget. She waited until I looked at her. You did well in there. Not because you won something, because you were precise. That matters more than people think. She left. I sat in my cubicle and stared at the wall for a long time. There was a small calendar pinned above my monitor, one of those free ones from an insurance company. And it was still turned to May. I reached up and flipped it to June. It felt like more than a month changing. That weekend was the longest of my life. Dominic and I existed in the apartment like two objects occupying the same shelf, but belonging to different rooms. He stayed in his bedroom most of Saturday. I heard him on the phone once. Low, tense, rapid. But I couldn't make out the words. He came out to eat around 8 in the evening, reheated something in the microwave, and went back without looking at me. Sunday morning, he finally spoke. I was at the kitchen table with my blue notebook, reviewing my timeline for Monday. He stood in the doorway with a glass of water and said, Bridge, we should talk. I looked up. About what? About what happened? In the meeting. I think there's been a misunderstanding. I set my pen down. A misunderstanding. Yeah, I know you feel like I used your work, but a lot of those ideas were things we talked about together. It's not like I stole a finished product. I took concepts we discussed and developed them in my own direction. That's collaboration. I let him finish. I didn't interrupt. I didn't raise my voice. I just watched him stand there, glass of water in hand, rewriting history in real time with the same easy confidence he'd used his entire life. When he was done, I said, Dominic, the seasonal demand model I explained on Thursday, the one you couldn't answer a single question about, I built that at 2 in the morning on March 9th. It's saved on the shared drive with my credentials. The version history shows 47 edits across 6 weeks, all under my login. Your version appeared 5 days before the pitch, built in PowerPoint with no supporting data files, no formulas, and no connected sources. He opened his mouth. I'm not finished, I said. The warehouse consolidation concept from October, the one you submitted to Frank's team the same week I sent it to Helen. I have the original file with a creation date 4 days before yours. The vendor evaluation matrix you presented in December? My draft was started in November. I have every timestamp, every file, every version. His face didn't crumble the way faces crumble in stories. It tightened. His jaw set. His eyes went flat. The way they did when we were kids and our mother caught him in a lie. Not remorseful, just recalculating. "So what?" he said. "You're going to ruin me over some spreadsheets?" "I'm not ruining you. I'm correcting the record. This is my career, Bridget." It was mine first. He stared at me, and in that stare, I saw something I'd never seen directed at me from my brother before. Not shame, not guilt, resentment. Pure, unfiltered resentment. The kind that comes from someone who has always been handed the narrative suddenly being told they didn't write it. He put the glass of water down on the counter. "You know what your problem is? You've always needed to be the smartest person in the room. You've always needed credit for every little thing. You can't just let things go." I closed my notebook. "I let things go for 2 years, Dominic. That's how we got here." He walked out of the kitchen. His bedroom door closed. Not a slam. A firm, deliberate click. And I sat there at the table, pulse steady, hands still, and felt something I hadn't expected. Relief. Not joy. Not victory. Relief. The kind that comes when you finally stop carrying a truth no one else was willing to hold. Monday morning, 9 o'clock. Raymond Ware's office. It was smaller than I expected. A wide oak desk, a window facing east, a shelf lined with operations textbooks and a single framed photo of a golden retriever. Raymond sat behind his desk. Constance stood by the window. Helen was in one of the 2 chairs opposite the desk. The second chair was empty. It was for me. I sat down and placed my folder on the desk. Inside was everything: the complete evidence package, timestamps, version histories, file metadata comparisons, email trails. I had organized it chronologically, 1 page per incident, with my files on the left and Dominic's submissions on the right. Raymond put on his reading glasses and went through it page by page. He didn't skim. He read. For 11 minutes. I watched the clock on the shelf behind him. The room was silent except for the sound of paper turning. When he finished, he removed his glasses and looked at me. "How long have you known?" "Since October, the first incident." "Why didn't you come forward sooner?" I paused. It was a fair question. The honest answer was complicated, but I gave it anyway. "Because he's my brother, and because I kept hoping he'd stop." Raymond nodded slowly. He looked at Constance. She gave a small nod back, the kind that carries the weight of a longer conversation that already happened behind closed doors. "Here's what's going to happen," Raymond said. "I'm initiating a formal internal review of Dominic's submissions over the past 12 months. HR will be involved. Frank Massaro will be notified that his endorsement of the duplicated work has been flagged, and the Meridian framework will be reattributed to you, fully. Your name, your credit, your presentation." He paused. "You'll present the revised pitch to Hargrove and Lyle on Thursday." My breath caught. Not dramatically, just a small hitch, like a clock hand skipping forward. "I want the person who built the model to defend the model," Raymond said. "That's you. Can you do that?" I looked at him. I thought about the stairwell where I cried, the parking garage where I almost quit, the notebook, the locked bedroom door, the blue cover, the first page. "Yes," I said. "I can do that." Type karma in the comments if you believe the truth always finds its way out. No matter how long it takes, no matter how deep it's buried. I used to wonder about that. I don't anymore. Thursday came faster than I was ready for. Or maybe I was more ready than I realized. It's hard to tell the difference when you've been preparing for something your whole life without knowing it. I woke up at 5:40. The rain from the week before had cleared, and the morning light came through my window in pale gold strips across the bedroom floor. I lay still for a moment, listening. The apartment was quiet. Dominic's door had been closed for 3 days straight. He'd come and go while I was at work. We hadn't spoken since the kitchen conversation on Sunday. I got up, showered, chose a navy blazer I'd bought the previous spring but never worn. It still had the tag on the inside pocket. I cut it off with scissors, put the blazer on, and looked in the mirror. I didn't look powerful. I didn't look like someone about to walk into the most important meeting of her career. I looked like myself. That was enough. I made coffee, poured it into a travel mug, picked up my blue notebook from the kitchen table, and I left. The drive to work was 15 minutes. I took the same long route through the park, past the oaks, past the intersection where the old bookstore used to be before it became a smoothie shop. The trees were full now, thick, summer green, and the light filtered through them in patterns that shifted with the breeze. I remember thinking that the world doesn't stop for your big moments, it just keeps being beautiful around them. I parked on level 3 again, same spot. I opened the notebook to the first page and read the sentence one more time. I will outlast this. Then I closed it, put it in my bag, and walked into the building. The revised pitch to Hargrove and Lyle was set for 11 o'clock. Same conference room, 32nd floor, conference room A, mahogany table, floor-to-ceiling windows. But this time, the setup was different. There was no 12-slide deck, no podium performance. Constance had worked with me to restructure the presentation as a working session, part walkthrough, part live demonstration, part open dialogue, the kind of format where you can't hide behind slides. You either know your work or you don't. Dana Platt was back with her team. She looked the same, composed, watchful, her pen resting between two fingers like a conductor's baton. Raymond was at the head of the table again. Constance sat beside him. Helen was across the room, near the window. Martin Kessler was notably absent, and Dominic was not in the building. I learned later that he had been placed on administrative leave pending the internal review. His badge access had been restricted to the lobby only. HR had contacted him Monday afternoon. I stood at the front of the room. No podium this time. I had a laptop open on the table, connected to the screen, with the live model running. The actual working model, not a static image of it. The numbers moved in real time. The inputs were adjustable. It breathed. I began. I didn't start with a greeting or a summary or a joke. I started with a question. What does it cost your company when a delivery arrives 1 day late to a regional distribution center in the Northeast Corridor during peak season? Dana Platt tilted her head slightly. One of her colleagues shifted forward. I typed a number into the model. The screen updated. Cost impact, cascading delay projection, vendor penalty estimate, all live, all traceable. That's the model, I said, and I'm going to walk you through every layer of it. For the next 45 minutes, I did exactly that. I explained the architecture. I showed the data sources. I demonstrated the seasonal adjustment, the 12% figure that had unraveled Dominic's performance 2 weeks earlier. And I walked them through the methodology step by step. When Dana asked a question, I answered it in full. When her logistics lead challenged an assumption, I pulled up the supporting data in real time and let the numbers respond. I wasn't performing. I was just showing them what I had built. When I finished, Dana Platt set her pen down and looked at Raymond. "This is what we've been looking for," she said. 12 months of conversations, and this is the first time someone has shown us the engine, not just the paint. Raymond nodded. He looked at me, and for the second time he said, "Clean thinking." But this time, he added something. "We'd like Bridget on the implementation team, directly." Hargrove and Lyle signed the Meridian contract the following Tuesday, 12.4 million over 3 years. My name was listed as lead operational strategist on the project charter, not Dominic's, not Frank's, mine. The weeks after that moved quickly, the way water moves once a dam breaks. Not violently, just steadily, filling in the spaces that had been dry for too long. Dominic's internal review concluded in early July. HR found a pattern of duplicated submissions across 5 separate instances over 10 months. His employment was terminated. Not loudly. Penmark handled it quietly, the way large companies do when the mess is internal. He was given a standard separation package and a non-disclosure clause. No lawsuit, no public drama, just a door closing behind him. Frank Massaro was reassigned from the operations division to a lateral role in compliance oversight. It wasn't a demotion on paper, but everyone in the building knew what it meant. He stopped eating in the cafeteria after that. Martin Kessler sent me an email 2 weeks after the Hargrove signing. It was 3 sentences long. He said he regretted the delay in reviewing my evidence and acknowledged that the process should have moved faster. He didn't apologize directly, but the email existed. That was something. I moved out of the apartment in August, found a 1-bedroom across town, on the 4th floor of a quiet building with a balcony that faced west. The sunsets were unremarkable, just sky and rooftops. But they were mine. I unpacked slowly, put the brown leather notebook on the shelf above my desk, put the blue one beside it. 2 chapters of the same story. Dominic called me once, in September. I was making dinner, lemon chicken, a recipe I'd learned from a coworker, and his name appeared on my phone screen. I stared at it for 3 rings. Then I answered. "Bridge," he said. His voice was thinner than I remembered. Not broken, just reduced. Like someone had turned the volume down on him. "Hey, Dom. I just wanted to say, I know things got messed up. And I know I played a part in that. I'm not calling to make excuses. I just wanted you to know that I'm trying to figure some things out." I listened. I didn't interrupt. And when he was done, I said, "I hope you do, Dominic. I mean that." There was a long pause. "Are we okay?" he asked. I thought about it. Really thought about it. Not the automatic yes I would have given a year ago. Not the resentful no I might have given 3 months ago. I thought about the kitchen counter, the notebook, the stairwell, the parking garage, the conference room, the nod. "We're not where we were," I said, "and I don't think we should be. But I'm not carrying anger for you. I just need space to be my own person, without being your foundation." He didn't argue. He said, "Okay," and we hung up. I went back to my lemon chicken. It was slightly overcooked. I ate it anyway, standing at the counter in my small kitchen, looking out the window at the last stripe of daylight fading behind the rooftops. I think people expect these stories to end with a hug, or a courtroom, or a villain on their knees begging for forgiveness. But real life doesn't work like that. Real life ends in kitchens and quiet phone calls and overcooked chicken. It ends with you standing in your own apartment, in your own name, knowing that the work you built is the work the world finally sees. I don't hate Dominic. I don't need to. Hating him would mean he still takes up space in the architecture of who I am. And I've spent too long building that architecture to let anyone else live in it rent-free. If you've ever been the person doing the work while someone else took the bow, I see you. I'm not going to tell you it gets better on a schedule. I'm not going to tell you the truth always wins on time. But I will tell you this. Don't stop building. Don't stop documenting. Don't stop knowing your own value even when the room refuses to reflect it back. Because one day, someone will ask the right question. And when they do, you'll be the only one in the room who can answer it. That was my story. If it meant something to you, leave a comment. Tell me what part stayed with you. Share this with someone who needs to hear it today. Subscribe if you want to stay. I'll be here, telling the next one. And if you took something from this, remember the sentence I wrote on the first page of that blue notebook. I will outlast this. You will too.